So next up for you, I have a small group. Now, I love teaching self-control as well as self-regulation because I feel like these are preventative techniques, preventative strategies that kids can learn to avoid getting into conflicts and having problems. So I love helping them understand this. Now, self-control, I have another self-control group called Wiggle Worms that's for the little guys, and it focuses on impulse control, whereas this self-control group, Calming the Storm, it's weather-themed, it focuses on decision making and healthy habits and some of those higher thinking self-control tasks for upper elementary and middle school. So it starts with a table of contents, and then of course we have our group rules. So I always like to start the groups with the group rules so you can go through these or come up with some on your own. And then we have our feelings check. So you get an included feelings check poster, and then along with some tips for facilitating a feelings check. So it's always important to model for the students. So start with yourself, and I encourage you to get vulnerable and use real life examples. Like maybe say, I feel sad today because my dog ran away. And hopefully that's not true, but that's just an example. So have the students identify how they're feeling and why. They can reference the poster, or if they're still having a hard time coming up with an emotion to name, they can use a 1 to 10 scale. Then we have a self-control self-assessment. So we want to see where they're at. Now, some of these things they may have never even heard of before, like catastrophic thinking, but we're going to teach them this through each session. And then at the end of the group, when they take the same self-assessment, hopefully they can answer with all yeses. So each week has an outline that's aligned to the ASCA mindsets and behaviors. It also has an objective for what we're working on, and then just kind of a list of what's going on. So we're going to start with that, the group rules and the feelings check. We always start that way. And then what's unique about this group is it has a poster for each session. So this is kind of cool because you can hang them up in your office. And so you kind of introduce a new concept each time. So it's weather themed because you want to explain to the kids, like the weather's always changing and unpredictable, our feelings are always changing, and sometimes it's hard to stay in control of our actions. So you want to ask them what they already know about self-control, and if they're even interested in improving their self-control. So this first one's just general weather, and then you'll see each week has a different component of weather. That this is kind of like an initial discussion poster. Then you move right along into an icebreaker of a scoot game. Now, I absolutely love scoot games. So what you're going to do is you'll see these little cards. You're going to cut them out, and you place them around the room. And then you're going to have students have this. So they're going to have this page holding it in their hand. A clipboard works great for this. So they have a clipboard with this on it and a pen, and then they're going to walk around the room, going to each number, and then circling the correct answer, or what they believe to be correct. Then at the end, you'll go over it together. So, for example, you'll have some students start at number 1, another student start at number 2, another student start at number 3, and they have, just a few moments to answer, and then you say scoot, and then they move to the next one. So if you're at 1, you move to 2. If you're at 3, you move to 4. If you're at 5, you move to 6, and so on until they have completed all of the questions. And of course, if you're on the last one, if you're at 18, you would move back to 1. So scoot games are really fun. You can even pair them with music. That's a fun activity, or a fun idea, I mean. So you can play some music. Like I like to play Wipeout. It's like da-na-na-na-na-na-na. And while it's going, then you pause, and that's when scoot, and they all move. So really fun, great icebreaker. Now, so each week has an icebreaker, and then it has a interactive notebook component. So they're going to have a notebook, so you can either get a folder, like a 3-pronged paper folder, and they can put leaves of paper in there, or you can have them an actual spiral-bound notebook, composition notebook, whatever you have on hand. Keep it simple. But the idea is that each session they'll have an interactive notebook component, and they're going to add to this notebook. So as you can see, and I have some real life pictures of this I'll show at the end. But as you can see, this first one here, they're going to write their own definition of self-control in the center, and then they're going to write, different, this is a definition of self-control: controlling your reactions, controlling your thoughts, controlling your actions, and controlling your words. And then they're going to write their own definition in the center there. So there's the foldable cutout. And each session has a journal. So they're going to define self-control and then talk about what they want to get out of this group. Now, week 2, this one's all about triggers. So you're going to start with your poster. This time we're talking about a barometer and how it helps predict the weather. So you can read this poster aloud to them, telling them how our triggers kind of predict if we're going to lose control. So the more we pay attention to our triggers and what our body's telling us, then we can prevent losing control. So talk about the barometer. They've likely, maybe don't know this word, but you can explain what it is and then talk to them about their potential triggers. You could even share some examples of your own. And then for the icebreaker, this one is a social story. So this one's really cool. You're going to put these 3 clouds on a poster board, or you could do it on the wall or a chalkboard. And then you're going to point to the different ones with a stick or a ruler. So what you're going to do, so those are the materials you need, like somewhere to put these clouds and then something to point with. So you're going to get 2 students from the group to be presenters. So one student's going to read the social story, and then the other student's going to point to a problem cloud in story 1 and the trigger clouds in story 2, like a weather person. So it's a really cute activity. And the other students in the group are going to tell the weather person when to point. So they're going to tell them when a girl in the story isn't taking control of her actions in story 1 and when they see one of Carter's triggers in story 2. So we'll get to the stories in a second. You'll see what I'm talking about. So all students will be participating in the discussion dice. So everyone's participating in the reading because some students are physically pointing, one student's reading, and the other students are saying, oh, now, this is a problem, or this is a trigger, this is a trigger. And then at the end, everyone does the discussion dice. And then in Carter's story, there's an additional cloud, a storm cloud. So these are the problems. So for example, they're reading the story about Marley and Mina, and as you see here, you can see some potential problems. So right here, Marley says she's not good at math, and when she gets back a low grade on her test, she says, I told you I'm bad at math. So that was problem number 2. So they're going to identify the problems, and then in Carter's story, you're going to identify the triggers. So it says, when he arrived at school, he realized he forgot his money for the field trip, and he left it at home. So that's a trigger for him, right? So then they're going to say, oh, that's a trigger. So the idea here is that as they're reading and listening to the story, they can identify, externalize their feelings to these characters and identify problems and potential triggers. And then at the end, Carter pushes and yells at his friend, and so what seems like for no reason, but as the reader that you've seen these triggers coming, and that would be the storm cloud. That's the loss of control. So put these on the board. One kid's pointing like a weather person. It's a really, really fun activity. I hope you guys love this. And again, there's those discussion dice. So afterward, after you're reading it, then you're going to assemble this, and then the students will take turns rolling and answering the questions. And then we have a discussion guide if you want to, facilitate a further conversation on this. So you can talk about internal and external control if you want to dig a little deeper. Now, the interactive notebook for this one is all about triggers. So you're making a little pocket about your triggers and then writing their different triggers on there and putting them into the pocket. Then we have our second journal, which is where they're talking all about their triggers. And then they have a space at the bottom to talk about a time they showed self-control this week. Now, week 3, we're talking about those coping strategies, or in this case, cool down strategies. So it's icicles. So icicles are a sign that the weather's cooling down, and we can use strategies to stay cool when we feel like we're going to lose control. So ask students if they have any of these they know of already. What are some of their favorite ways to cool down? And how do they stop themselves from losing control? Then we have a matching game. So this one, it is important to print on a little thicker paper or to paste it to some construction paper or something so the kids can't read through them, because this is a matching game. So that would make it kind of easy to cheat. But you print these and then you do a memory matching game. So, where you pick up, you're looking for a pair. If you don't get a pair, you put them back face down. If you do get a pair, you take the cards. So then eventually, with process of elimination, all the pairs are gone. Now, as they're doing it, so if someone gets the pair, like, oh, I got 2 sets of headphones, listen to music. As they're winning, as they're getting that pair, ask them if they've ever used that coping strategy or that cool down strategy. And if they haven't, you can ask if anyone else in the group has. Then for our interactive notebook, we're going to have students draw a picture of a toolbox. So a few different things here. I like to use an envelope, and you can have them put it on the envelope, the toolbox, draw a picture of a toolbox or print a picture of a toolbox and glue it on an envelope. So then they're opening the envelope and putting the calm down strategies inside. That's kind of fun. Or you could use like a plastic baggie if that's all you have access to. Or they could just simply draw a toolbox. But the envelope, I think, is the best scenario for the interactive notebook. So you're using those same cards. Each student will have a set, and they can choose the ones that they want to put in their own toolbox. And here's some sample toolboxes that you can cut out and paste on the envelopes. Then for journal number 3, not only are we asking them which cool down strategies that they think will work well for them, but we're also asking them about a time they've showed self-control this week. So hopefully you're meeting every week, and they can kind of reflect on, since the last session, when have they showed self-control. Week 4 is all about catastrophic thinking. So they likely haven't heard of this term before, and I love to use the analogy of a tornado, how they are spiraling out of control, and how catastrophic thinking is when you expect things to turn out for the worst, and you feel like you can't handle the outcome, and it's a chain reaction. So have them, start a little discussion on that if their thoughts have ever spiraled out of control. And then this one's really fun. You cut out these strips of paper and mix them up, and then the kids are going to try to put them in order of how the catastrophic thinking chain of events happened. So for example, they start by simply not understanding a math problem, but they get all the way to, I'll have to live with my parents forever. So as you can see there, then they start to think, oh, I probably got all of them wrong. Oh, I'm going to fail the class. Oh, I'm never going to go to college. Oh, I have to live with my parents forever. Their thoughts just kind of get out of control. So, discuss the faulty thinking here, and then positive replacement thoughts. For the interactive notebook piece for this one, they're going to glue down this flip book and cut on the dotted line so it's different flaps. So then they're going to write like a catastrophic thinking that they've had on each tab. But not only do they have the tornado, but they have the wind flip chart. And on this one, they're going to write a positive replacement thought under each flap. So I'll show you a photo of this in action after we get through these sessions. It's a really cool interactive notebook activity. And for this journal, they're going to talk about times that their thoughts have spiraled out of control, and again, that check-in for the week. Now, number 5 is all about making good choices. So a thermostat tells the temperature changes, and like a thermostat, our internal temperature can change when it comes to decision making. So we're talking about heating up under pressure and trying to stay cool. So this is a fun one. You're going to do a scavenger hunt. So what you'll do is split the students into 2 teams, and they're going to search the room to find these clouds. So you're going to cut out and hide these clouds. You'll see them here, these, around the room, and the kids are going to split up and try to find the clouds, and whoever finds the most wins. On the clouds are different reasons why people may lose self-control. So then after you find all the clouds, find these reasons, you're going to read these 5 scenarios and lay the clouds that apply on top of the page. So you're going to use the visual to explain how their reasoning can get foggy when the cloudy thoughts, and it's difficult to see a clear right choice. So this is a really concrete example of this kind of hard concept to understand. So as you physically put the clouds on top of the paper, the kids can see how it's getting harder to see the clear right choice. So for example, this scenario says Jake can play online video games, but his parents' rule is that he cannot chat with strangers or players he doesn't know. Jake wonders who the other players are and why his parents don't want him talking to them. So the reason for that one would be you're curious. So Jake's curious, so that's an example of how curiosity can kind of fog our decision making. Then for the interactive notebook component to this one, it is a thermostat. So this is where you're going to cut out a thermometer and the cards, and then students are going to glue the cards in order of what they struggle with from top to bottom. So ones that are higher on the thermometer indicate things that are difficult for them, and the lower ones don't affect them as much. So for example, maybe peer pressure is really difficult for them, but impulse control or having to wait isn't that big of a deal for them. So everyone's will look different, and then you can discuss. For the journal, we have that weekly check-in, but then we also talk about how they can resist these thoughts and what cloudy thoughts get in the way when they're trying to show self-control. This lesson is probably the most complex, but the most effective of the entire group. Now, week 6, we're talking about successful habits. So proactive things we can do here. We're talking about lightning. So, you want to explain to the kids as you show this poster that in nature, lightning and thunder work as a pair. So just like lightning happens in a flash, so do choices that we don't think through all of the way. Then thunder is the consequence that follows the lightning. So if they have self-control, that means that they're thinking of that thunder or thinking of those consequences before they take that lightning action. And so you want them to talk about some of their positive habits and what some of their negative habits are, because putting good habits into place helps make good choices easier and then puts a barrier to creating poor choices. So you're going to start with an I have, who has icebreaker. So this is a fun game. It can be a little tricky, but once the kids get the hang of it, they really like it. So you're going to cut out the game cards and pass one to each student. And for it to work, all the cards have to go to someone. So there's 8 cards, but if you don't have 8 students, that's okay. Some kids can have more than one card. So basically this game is played like a chain. So you're going to start with that I have always running late card, who has set to alarms card. So what I mean by that is one student's going to say, I have the always running late card, who has the set to alarms card? And then the student who has that one says, oh, I have the set to alarms card, who has always losing my homework card? And then that person goes on to the I have always losing my homework, who has organized your backpack? So it's kind of like a little game of verbal tag, but it's neat because they're saying solutions, easy habits for these problems. So running late, set an alarm. Lose your homework, organize your backpack. Watch too much TV, put books on your nightstand. These are habits they can put in place. Really fun icebreaker. Then the interactive notebook component for this one is you're going to put these little accordion flaps in so students can write habits to start and habits to stop. So just kind of a self-reflection for them. For Journal 6, they're going to write about those habits that they have that are bad and how they can replace them with a good habit. You may have to help them come up with some good replacement habits. And again, that check-in question on how they've showed self-control this week. Now for week 7, they're talking about their support system. We like to talk about an umbrella for this one, so staying safe and dry. That's identifying those people in our support system who can really help us out. So you want to talk about how an umbrella can help protect you from the rain. A good support system can help protect you from losing control. You're going to start with a beach ball toss icebreaker. So what you're going to do is cut out these cards, paste them to a beach ball, like an inflatable one, and then toss it around. And when the student catches it, wherever their thumbs land, they get to choose between those 2 questions. So they can select which one they'd like to answer. An alternative to this is to play Jenga. So these are perfect Jenga size. You can cut these out and paste them on some Jenga blocks and do Jenga instead. And then for the interactive notebook, this one's pretty simple. They're just writing on the umbrella people who are in their support system, and then they have a second umbrella, and that time they're writing how that person can help them. So for example, they can write their mom, and then how she can help is she can talk about what's bothering them. So there are the 2 umbrellas. Of course, have them color it in and get really creative. For this number 7 journal reflection, they're going to talk about their support system. Not only name who's in it, but then ask them, make sure they do the second part. Have you asked them for help before? Because maybe they think of that person, but maybe they haven't tried it yet. And then again, that check-in. For the final one, we're calling this one disaster preparedness or preparing for the future. And it's all about sunshine. So you want to use the sunshine poster to remind them that even after a rainstorm, the sun reminds us of a brighter future and that they can make bright choices even if they've lost control a lot in the past. So I love this because it gets kids thinking forward and positive instead of just reflecting on all of the times that they've lost self-control. So if you're doing the posters, by the time you get to this one, it's going to be really cool because you're going to have all 8 weather posters in your office. So you're going to start with some task cards. So you're going to print and cut these out and then pass them out. And the students are going to take turns answering them. They can do this in whole group or in pairs. So it's basically just a way to review and practice what they've learned. So there's 4 different kinds here. So there's what would you do cards. So that's a scenario, and they have to say what they would do, how they would use self-control. Then there's have you used this strategy card. So it'll name a coping strategy, and they have to discuss if they've used that before. And then a what strategy works best for you card. So they have to decide which strategy would work best for them, given the choice of 2. And then finally, a true or false card. So students are going to read a statement and decide if it's true or false. Then for the final part of our interactive notebook, it's a sun shape. So students are going to cut it out, and then they're going to write their biggest takeaway from the group in the center. So pretty easy, just the thing that they learned the most, or what they applied the most in their life, or where they've seen the biggest change, their favorite activity, anything, their biggest takeaway. And for that final journal reflection, they're going to talk about how they feel about self-control now. And then this last question is different on this one because it's saying, how can they show self-control in the future? So hopefully by this point, they feel really prepared and have a really good understanding of self-control. Now they take the self-assessment, and hopefully this time they have a lot more yeses because they've learned so much in this group. And here is the progress tracker example. So I mentioned you have the posters and you can hang them on your wall. In addition to that, we have a really cool progress tracker that you can use. Now this is cool. I love doing this because students can anticipate when the group will end, and this helps with closure, and they can keep an eye on how much time they have left. So each week as you add something here, you can say, oh, we're done 3 sessions, so we only have 5 more to go. It's just kind of a way to prepare them for the end of the group. So you have a simple session chart, and you would cut out and paste these after each session. I hope you loved that one as much as I do. Let me show you what it looks like in real life. So here is the example of the group forecast, or that progress tracker. Here are some of those cards to use in session 8. Here are those clouds. So this is where the kids are trying to determine things that fog their good decision making. So you're going to read the scenarios and then lay the different clouds on top. Here's the tornado activity, where they're putting them in order to see how they have that catastrophic thinking. Here's the social story, where they play the dice game. And here's some examples of the interactive notebook. So this is talking about self-control. Here's their triggers, coping strategies toolbox, their tornado of catastrophic thinking. There's the win for the replacement behaviors. Here are their temptations on a scale there. Positive and negative habits they want to start and stop. And their social supports. And finally, that takeaway, that's the final foldable there.